And once I see the little red light that says live and the clock is ticking and we are rocking and rolling. Hey, Sue, all the way from Melbourne. How are you? Ready for another installment of Get a Clue in 52 with you, Sue Mathieson, my
I am indeed.
co-author. This is the speaker edition. By now, people know this is the fourth Get a Clue in 52 book in the soft skills series. We did the original, we did the entrepreneur edition, we did the coaching edition last year, Get a Clue in 52 for coaches, and now for speakers. And I laugh when I say that because you and I both know that this is for non-speakers as well. And only about 20 of these tips are really just for speakers. And then as we're working through those 20 tips, we realize, well, guess what? These are for authors and writers or anybody that's producing content wants to imagine. So we say it's for speakers, but the reality is we're casting a wide net. And if you're here, you're probably in the right place for some reason. So let me go ahead and let's get into what we're doing. Now, the Get a Clue in 52 books, the 52 tips, they're always laid out across 5 different categories. And so let me go ahead and introduce that. And then Sue, you could do a review of the tips in the section that we're in currently before we get into the reading word for word. Yeah? All right. So first of all, hey, everyone, I'm going to do this early. I always forget to do this early. I'm Jeff Klubeck. I'm author and founder of the Integrity Game. I'm founder of Get a Clue Inc., right, which owns the Integrity Game. And so I've got that Get a Clue brand, the Coach Jeffrey brand, but the Integrity Game is what I'm really passionate about. And interestingly enough, it's section 1 in our book, right? When we're getting ready to speak or build our career through speaking, we want to have foundation. We want to have framework. We want to be resilient. We want to be sturdy. We want to be focused. We want to be immune to pressure tests. We want the structural integrity that answering the 10 questions of the Integrity Game gives us. And so we took the 10-point model, which 10 questions that people playing the Integrity Game are supposed to answer, right? And we just turned them into tips, right? And we encourage you to understand the Integrity Game and get through those 10 tips, have answers to those 10 questions. I don't care if your answers change tomorrow, but what I care about is if you don't have answers today, you might be building a mansion on top of quicksand. We don't want that. So now, talk about building a mansion, section 2 in our book was to bring out your brand, right? A lot of people, I can talk, I can speak, I could do better than that speaker. Why aren't I up there? Oh, I could do that. A lot of times we sit in the crowd, we sit in the audience, and we see ourselves as being able to speak. But it's not just the speech, right? The speech needs to bring out our brand. It needs to communicate our brand. It needs to be a function of, a product of our promise to the marketplace. What can the marketplace expect from us? Now we're talking about differentiation, competitive advantage, what counts as a promise, market versus market segment, eliminating jargon, adding slogan. We had a lot of good tips about bringing out the brand, the marketing communication that you're aware of, that you sprinkle in to your speech so that you're not just giving a speech, you're also reinforcing your brand. All right. So now that takes us to the section that we're in now. It's amazing. It seems like yesterday, Sue, right, that we just got into this section. And it's going to seem like tomorrow that we're done. But we have today and 2 more tips left in Be Fearless. Now, I slow down when I say this, and you're going to review the tips for us. But the key purpose of this section, Be Fearless, once we've built our foundation, once we've decorated it with our differentiation so we stand out in the marketplace, now we're ready to prepare speeches. So be fearless. These 10 tips, they're all about getting into production on your speech. The first 2 tips were conceptual mindset pieces, right? And Sue's going to go over those for us when we elaborate on them. But then the final 8 tips of this section, we're in the 6th of them now, tip number 28 overall. It's 8 steps to fearless public speaking. 8 steps. I've taught thousands of adult learners how to get past their fear into confidence, into conversational flow by using this 8 steps of preparation. And it's not speaking that we're afraid of. It's how to prepare for speaking that we're really afraid of. Sue's going to elaborate on that in a minute. But the bottom line, the purpose of section 3 is all about getting into production, following the 8 steps that will help any of us get over our fears and be more conversational, to be ourselves when we're on stage, to be confident that I'm not tethered to one exact word, that I can say what I need to say a number of different ways as long as I know my objective, what I'm trying to get across. I want to be myself doing that. I don't want to be searching around for an exact word. I don't want to forget a word. I don't want to be reading word for word. I don't want to do anything that disconnects me from my audience. And so, Sue, you're going to elaborate a review tips 21 through 27 before we read today, tip number 28. Let me just say before we do that, next section that we'll cover is elements, forms, and functions. So one of these tips, the one that we covered last week, tip number 27 overall, is the fifth step to fearless public speaking. And that fifth step is so dynamic, so important. We might review it a little bit today, but we screen shared, we got into it, right? We showed the dynamic and the template, and we're talking about outlining, organizing your thoughts, outlining your speech, creating the outline, putting, your fingers in motion, getting words on paper. We talked about it strategically last week, but in all of section 4, we're going to talk about it tactically. How do we execute the strategy? What are the elements? What are the forms? What are the functions? To go deeper on step 5, to make sure that you really understand, first of all, how important it is to outline it versus wing it versus memorize versus write it word for word, on and on. And then hopefully, we can only do so much in a live stream on social media, but hopefully you'll feel a bit of a hand-holding as we take you through the depths of step 5, which is, what are these elements? What form does it take? And how do these elements function in my speech? And that should give you a confidence to get off the live stream and go to the computer and start working on it. Okay. And then at the end, we're going to kind of take a break, right? From the intense, depthful work that we're doing on preparing speeches. We're going to step back and actually go up to 50,000 feet elevation and look down at the entirety of our career or our practice as a speaker, coach, author, right? How does speaking fit into what we're doing in our world, in our life, in our career, etc.? And we're going to pay attention to 12 accountabilities that we all need to pay attention to if we want to grow a skill set or a hobby or an interest into a practice, and dare I say, even a business, right? So we're going to look at 12 accountabilities that any business needs to pay attention to, especially service providers, aspiring and emerging coaches, authors, speakers, trainers. We're going to take a look at the 12 accountabilities. I call it the Klubeck 12 step, and that's how we'll end the year, to the theme, by the way, to the musical theme of 99 bottles of beer on the wall. So, right, we're gonna have fun with that. 99 bottles of beer, 12 accountabilities on the wall. All right, so that's where we're at, that's where we're headed. But let's go ahead and go one level deeper, and let me hand it over to Sue. First of all, Sue, how are you overall? And then secondly, can you review us and take us through tips 21 through 27, and then we'll get into our tip reading today.
Definitely. So thank you. I am doing well. I had a very measured week, really, which has been great. So yes, starting at tip 21, which is the first in this section. And before we went into, so each section has 10 tips, and the 8 steps to fearless public speaking sort of came further into this section. But to start it off, the first one we focused on was, it's not about you. So when we actually get, as a speaker, to that point of being in front of the audience, it's all about the audience. Prior to that, it was definitely, leading up to it, all about us. But
hey, quick hello to Dee Davis, who's joining in. Dee, we see you. You're here in the live stream with us. It's great to see you. Sue's doing a review of the tips in section 3 that we've covered so far before we get into today's word for word. Go ahead, Sue.
No worries. So it's not about you is tip number 1 in this section, 21. And then we moved into 22, which was the real fear of public speaking. And what we were talking about there was, it's the preparation for that and doing the work that really tends to be the fear. It's not actually getting up in front of people. And we went through what we can do to go through that and do the preparation. Mm-hmm. And tip 23 was the first in the 8 steps, where we went back to declaring our purpose. And we looked at what are the reasons for speaking. And it's to inform, to persuade, to entertain. And it could be one has a major focus. It could be a blend of those in when we're speaking.
Yeah, just to add to that, like any given speech could end up entertaining, persuading, or informing. But I always coach people to choose a main, even if it does all 3, even if there's points where you're entertaining and points where you're informative and points where you're persuasive. I want you to choose, everybody to choose what the main purpose is. The reason for that is the same with the integrity game. Every other decision that we make needs to be filtered through or attached to or in support of purpose. right? So there's other decisions that we make in the speech writing process. There's other decisions that we make when constructing a speech. But if we haven't declared what the main purpose is up front, it's going to be harder to make those decisions down the road. So we want to stick to declare a purpose and stick to it, even if we end up achieving other things. I just wanted to clarify on that, Sue. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, sure. That's great. So tip 24 we moved into was selecting a topic and naming our talk. And the topic is the part that is about us, and we want that to be serious. But our title, by differentiation, is the part that is about our clients and our audience. And that part needs to be catchy. We want that to be drawing our audience in and having them say, hey, I want to hear this person. That's going to is our title, that's really catchy and grabbing. That's going to have people saying, why would they want to hire us? Why would they want to put us in front of?
I need that. I got to hear that. Like, that's me. They're talking to me. That's I need to be there. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. And then moving into tip 25. So the fifth in this section, we focused on organizing our content. And then so getting from, we've got the topic, we've got our title, then we have to start breaking our content into specific components and keeping it natural, keeping it simple and easy to follow. The point being that as we start to do this process, it's helping us think through in our own mind, how am I structuring this? And I love, Jeff, what you talk about, building our speech up.
Yeah, constructing it.
We're constructing it. And so this framework helps us to do that. We're not just coming in and trying to write something word for word. And there were three main points that we can generally organize our content. It could be topic category, where we might have different aspects of the same thing. There's time and the chronology, where we have a first, then, and have that continuity pattern.
That's right.
Or space and geography, where we might have parts of something or different locations that might give an example of what we're talking about. And so they're the sort of three key ways that we might organize our content.
And by the way, there's also cause, effect, and problem solution. We talked also about the stock issues approach, where I talk about the issue, the barriers to resolving the issue, and the solutions. What's key here, Sue, is that there's a logical relationship. There's never enough time in any given talk to say everything there is about any given topic. So we're going to have to break any topic down into three main points. Or it could be 2 to 5 main points, but I always recommend 3. There's always powers in 3. We can get into a tangent on that. But one of the values here is for us as a speaker to be okay with what we're not going to say, what we're not. Like, a lot of speakers get fooled into thinking, because it all comes into our mind and we're so familiar with the entirety of the topic, right? But we need guardrails, we need boundaries, we need jurisdiction, we need a border. Like, this fits in the speech because of the way I've organized my points. This doesn't fit. It's okay if I don't talk about this. Hopefully I'm talking about what I'm talking about so well that they want to learn about this later and they want to take action and get more information and so forth. Most of the time in the professional world, when we're speaking, it's not to just speak and be done, but most of the time we want something to follow the speaking event, the speaking engagement, the presentation, the pitch, the whatever it is. We want more action to occur thereafter. So as a speaker, we want to get confident that it's okay what we're not talking about, as long as we have a very logical relationship that keeps the listeners or the audience engaged with what we are talking about. Right. And build healthy curiosity versus unhealthy curiosity, which I'll talk about down the road. But I just wanted to add to that piece when reviewing tip number 25. It's the logical relationship, right? If I organize categorically, Mexican food, American food, Thai food, they're all food, but they're different types of food, right? So there's a logical relationship there when I go topical or categorical. When I go chronological, as you said, first, then finally, the logical relationship is time. Time is what connects those different main points, right? When I go spatial or geographic, it's the front, the interior, and the back, or it's north, south, east, west, or right, it's the space, it's the location that gives me, right? So back to food, right? Sometimes I eat at home, sometimes I eat at a restaurant, and sometimes I eat on the beach. Those are 3 different locations where I eat. So if you talk about food, I can organize it categorically, I can organize it breakfast, lunch, dinner chronologically, or I can organize it spatially, geographically, places that I eat, or 3 favorite restaurants. Or so once we have these logical relationships in mind, it makes it easy to break down any topic into what we are confidently going to talk about, and then we get even more confident because we know what we're not going to talk about. And then the logical relationship keeps us on track as the speaker and helps us keep the audience on track as well. Everybody knows where they are at all times because of the logical relationship, rather than a disjointed approach to what those main points and then ultimately subpoints are. Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Yeah. So, but with what you're talking about in terms of getting that logical relationship and being okay with what we are going to talk about versus what we're not going to talk about, it gives us that freedom as we move into tip 26, where we looked at the depth, support, and substance, to start going deeper, because we're focused on, we know the relationship, we know what our outline ideas are going to be. And so we can go into the subpoints and start making those claim statements about particular issues that we want to pick up on in our
there's 2 things here when it comes to depth, support, and substance. First of all, we've got main points, so I can't just tell you that I ate at restaurant A, restaurant B, and restaurant C, right? It'd be a very short speech if that's all I said. At restaurant A, what about restaurant A? What about restaurant B? What about restaurant C? So now, first of all, my subpoints, I want them organized with a logical relationship too, right? But it doesn't have to be the same logical relationship as the main points. It just has to be a logical relationship. And then the other thing is, so first of all, that's the one thing I wanted to communicate, is that the same way I had a logical relationship when I decided what my main points are, I want a logical relationship when I decide what my subpoints are going to be. But then the content of those subpoints is what you're talking about. The claims and the evidence and the reasoning, right? The facts or the statistics or the testimonials or the stories or the anecdotes or the specific instances or the detailed illustrations or all of the substance that constitute main points, which gives depth and support to the overall speech. So 2 things there. Number 1, you also want a logical relationship on subpoints. And number 2, you want to bring in your facts, examples, analogies, statistics, testimonials, demonstrations, or comparisons to give substance to those points. And there's more strategy there. Go ahead, Sue. One more to review.
So then it was tip 27. So it was outlining part 1, which was focusing on the strategy of outlining, which brought us back to purpose to start with. And we emphasized that the outline is not the actual speech.
That's right.
And we looked at the power of logic, that and then we, seeing is believing, that we had to get it out. We're starting to get it out of our head, down on pen to paper, and actually get our thoughts out and start.
We want to be able to see the words on paper on the screen rather than just in our head. Go ahead. What you love? You say, wait, you love what? I love what you love. What do you love?
Burn the groove.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah. I love that headline where we started to look at those mental pictures and imagining the grooves of the record as it goes around, and that we could drop the needle in at any point almost and be able to bring that outline into our speech.
When it's segmented, we're going to elaborate on this in the next section, of course, when we go deeper on elements, forms, and functions. But the idea is, if I create an outline and I do a draft and I'm visualizing it, like I'm burning a groove in my brain, like after a while, when I step away from the computer, I should be able to close my eyes and see what I was working on. I have some sort of visual memory of what I was working on. So it gives me more confidence. It gives me more access. It gives me more freedom to deviate, by the way, and come back if I need to, etc. But rather than spinning our wheels mentally, once we get it into an outline format, we attach a linear form to our thoughts. Not that we have to stay linear, but that we always know where we are and where we can get to. And so the next word of my speech isn't dependent on the previous word. Or you follow, like I can put the needle where I want. I can take the needle off the record and engage with the audience and then drop it right back to where I know what section I'm in. I know what objective I'm trying to achieve. Whether I do it in any sort of word for word way or not doesn't matter at all. And that's really kind of what we're getting at with these 8 steps to fearless public speaking, is that if you prepare well enough, you'll be able to be conversational rather than using word for word or memorization or reading from a transcript or reading off of death by PowerPoint, right? You can replace those training wheels, those crutches, those security blankets with yourself. Go figure, right? That's what we're headed towards, right? We want to be ourselves at all time. At least that's what I appreciate. So before we get into tip number 28, which is measure the time, Dee, let's acknowledge you again. You're here. Welcome. How are you? Nice to see you. Do you have any comments or questions or anything? Yeah. Anything from you before we get into our word for word on tip number 28?
This is all such great reminders of everything. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just I've been having sound issues today. So yeah, really great reminders. And I'm sitting here listening to you talk and thinking about the next thing that I want to write, and thinking about what you're saying about how to organize it. And I guess I would say that, as somebody who is far less experienced at writing speeches and topics than you are, one of the things you mentioned all these different ways you can organize the information.
Yeah.
I get stuck sometimes trying to figure out what's the right way for my particular thing. Is it linear? Is it, location? Is it, how is there any method that you use to try to help you narrow those options down when you're trying to figure that part out?
All right, do you want the fun Friday jovial answer, or do you want the God darn it, Jeff? Why did I knew you were going to say that answer? Anyway, are you ready? Okay, let me just play around with a little bit. This is fun. So first of all, you've heard this before: junk in, junk out. Right? So let's just start with asking a better question. Right? Like, oh, what's the right way to do it? What if there was no right way?
But you want to find
as long as you have
best
a logic,
way, a good way.
Well, here, but this is what I'm getting at. So this is one of the things that the struggle is real. Are you ready? One of the things that we, Sue, myself, and you, Dee, and anybody out there listening, right? One of the things that we as speakers must embrace first before we can overcome it. We got to embrace it before we can overcome it. Is that not everybody's going to like us? Not everybody's going to get it. There is no single thing that will be best for everybody in our audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As long as, so in other words, I don't care if you use a topical pattern. I don't care if you use a spatial or geographic pattern. I don't care if you use a chronological pattern. I don't care if you use. I have opinions about all of them, right? What I care about is whether there's a logical relationship or not. Does that make sense? That's what I really care about. You follow? We don't know unless we surveyed everybody in your audience to understand all of their behavioral styles. All right. How many of you are on a DISC assessment, for example? How many of you are a high D? How many high S, high C? So some people, they don't want the detail, just give it to me bottom line. Some people need facts, figures, statistics. Some people need time to process what you're saying.
Oh, you've met my husband.
well, like me, but this is my cross to bear. Like, do you know how many times? And I'm trying to be funny about this, right? But like, slow the down, Jeff, because when I get going, I get going. You're right, and so that may not be best.
Yeah,
you understand?
Yeah, I think my real question, and this is maybe where I'm getting stuck in my own head. I was thinking about a class that I put together last year about understanding electrical systems, and it goes from where does energy really come from? How is it really generated? And how does it get to your house? And what happens when you actually flip on a light switch? It goes from that extreme to that extreme. And I struggled with, is there a best way? I mean, absolutely agree. You're not going to hit everybody's target, but is there I was trying to figure out, is it better to start with the macro and get it all the way down to the light switch that everyone understands? Or is it better to start with the light switch that everyone understands and go to the macro?
Well, just off the top of my head, I would say always start with something that everybody understands, because, generally speaking, you want to capture attention. The very first thing that you're doing in any given speech is capturing attention. And sometimes throughout the speech, you need to recapture attention. So be mindful of that. But the answer that you're not going to like is, are you ready? It depends. If there was a best way to do it, what would be the best way to do it? It depends. So who are the learners? What's the context in which they're learning? Back to this, right? Ready? Very, very back to the very beginning, right? What's the purpose of the speech? Is it to inform them? If it's to inform them, I might go cause-effect organizational pattern. And then I might organize my subpoints either chronologically, right? Probably chronologically, first, then finally. Here are the causes, first this, then this, and now here are the effects, right? So like I would think about cause, if it's inform, I might be thinking cause effect in a chronological pattern. If it's to persuade, if your main purpose is to persuade and you need people to take action afterwards, then I'm going to recommend you talk about the problem, the barriers to resolving that problem, and then the solutions. But then your subpoints, now you're going to have to get emotional. You're going to have to speak to pleasure and pain, and you're going to have to tell story, and you have to get on and on and on. So, the answer that you're not going to love is what's the right way or what's the best way? Well, first of all, there is no right way or best way. Second of all, if there was, it depends on the context, the audience, the purpose. What's your purpose? What's their purpose? What do you need to achieve for speaking? What do they need to achieve by being there? And then every decision you make within the speech has to be tethered to that. So the best way is going to be the one that helps you achieve your purpose. The best way to organize things is the way that helps you achieve your purpose. Does that make sense? The purpose bone's connected to the organized content bone, and the sub point's connected to the main point bone. Anyway, so I have fun with this. Back to Friday Jovial, yeah. So what I get excited about is, well, let's get on a Zoom and let's talk about it, and let's handhold. And it's hard working by ourselves sometimes. You know what I'm saying? And so left or because we see everything, we see the totality of everything. And as soon as I want to go and entertain an idea, there's another part of my mind that sees another aspect of what it is, and I start arguing with myself. So now I need to talk to somebody. Like, I could teach this stuff all day long, except when it's my own stuff. I was on a call this morning. Where somebody's like, "Hey, Jeff, you kind of need a better title." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, probably I do, huh?" Right? Like, so I need to, right? I need to, like Sue said, the topic that we choose to speak about is about us and our subject matter expertise. But the title for our talk needs to have something in there that speaks to the pleasure and pain, the pain avoidance or the pleasure seeking of our audience. So it kind of hurts me to say this, Sue. Are you ready? But here's the humility of it all. Playing the Integrity Game is not the best title for my Playing the Integrity Game keynote. A better title for my Integrity Game keynote is How to Reclaim Your Balance. 10 steps to resilience, right? 10 steps to beat overwhelm. 10 steps to avoid procrastination. 10 steps to eliminate underachievement. That would be a better, because now I'm procrastination, underachievement, overwhelm, out of balance. That's the issue that my audience is struggling with. The Integrity Game is my thing, and I'm proud of it. And I want to tell everybody the Integrity Game, right? Nobody knows what the hell the Integrity Game is, right? So what I need to talk about is 10 steps to overcome procrastination. They go, "Oh, I need that." It's like, "Oh, you want to overcome procrastination? Let's play the Integrity Game." But the title has to get them to the show. And then I can, does that make sense, Dee?
It does. Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. Super cool. That's great. I'm warmed up. If I wasn't already, I am now. Because I love coaching. I love teaching this stuff. You can tell I can't contain myself, right? But anything else before we get started on the word for word? We're going to get into tip number 28 today. And remember, real quick, we declared our purpose. Then we chose a topic. Then we broke the topic down into 3 main points using a logical relationship. Then we broke it further into the sub-points that will support those main points. We can do all of that in our head on our paper napkin. Then we had to get to the computer and start outlining and start to create the intro, the transitions, the body, the conclusion, and placeholders for us to build and construct our speech. So now we're in the 6th step today. The 6th step, after we drafted our outline, now we're ready to measure the time. Are you ready to measure the time word for word? And by the way, it's kind of irony, right? But I'm transparent about this. This is a live stream, and we're literally trying to read our book word for word. This is not necessarily a speech. It's public speaking, I guess, because we're live and there's an audience and whatever. But I never recommend speaking word for word. I just don't recommend it. And every time I read word for word every week, Sue, I still make mistakes. I'm like, hang on a second. Let me reread that. Hang on. I'm going to say that again. Hang on. I didn't say that with the same cadence with which I wrote it. And I'm a pro. So it's irony. I'm not trying to contradict myself. I'm actually trying to show you, as good as I am at all of this, how many mistakes I'm going to make in reading word for word, and why I don't recommend anybody deliver a speech word for word, right? And why we're doing so much jovial Q&A conversation in and around the word for word. So, all right, having said all of that, are we ready to rock and roll?
We are.
Okay, all right. So if you're following along at home, page 122, tip number 28 overall is the 6th step to fearless public speaking. Let's go ahead and measure the time. Now that you've gone through fully thinking out your topic, main points, subpoints, and supporting material, and have actually written it all down in an easy to use / manipulate outline format, you must read it out loud to measure for timing. Subcategory, revisit your speech. So here we go. Remember that the purpose of this step, all 8 steps, is not because you will be reading word for word everything you have written down in your outline when you go to deliver the actual presentation. Instead, there are 2 main reasons for measuring your timing. First, and quite obviously, you need to make sure that the amount of content you prepared is appropriate for the length of time you have allotted for your presentation. To be respectful to your audience, the sponsoring organization, and even yourself, you want to make sure you have enough but not too much content. Need I ask you to recall any pain you have felt as an audience member in a presentation that has run long, ... and has no end in sight, ... when you gotta go, ... but don't want to be rude and leave early, ... I digress. That's a fun one. I want to read that one again because it was so fun, but I'm going to keep going. I'll come back to it later. All right, continuing word for word. If you recite your outline out loud and it is too long or short, it's easy to go back into your outline and plug in or delete content. Following the strategies taught in step 5 last week, all of your content is in a logical order and expressed in line items with helpful subordination of points, subpoints, evidence, and transitions. This makes adding or removing content super easy by comparison. I'm not saying it's always easy, but by comparison to writing everything out word for word and then trying to, you follow? Right? Imagine just one block paragraph of your whole speech. No, thank you. Right? Has anybody ever seen a transcript of a speech printed out and it's just all one long thing? No bueno, nuh-uh, right? Because if that's too long or too short, I don't know, how am I going to take stuff out and add stuff and keep the flow of everything? It's like reauthoring. But if everything is outlined in line items, 1 sentence per line item, I can add and delete easily. All right, I'll elaborate on that down the road. So here we go. This makes adding or removing content super easy compared to having to rewrite a speech in paragraph form. A second, and in my opinion, more important reason to practice for timing is that the process may take 3 to 5 reps or cycles of reading aloud and editing. To practice for timing, we cannot read the outline in our heads. We must read out loud to get a real sense of the timing. Doing so forces us to, quote, run the material through our person, end quote. And I'm quoting myself there, by the way, in ways that activate more of our senses. At this point, you are physically interacting with your content, which keeps it with you during your actual speech. Sue, more burning of the groove that you mentioned earlier. Go ahead with your piece here.
Yeah, I notice that how I say things in my head is always different than how I initially say them out loud. It often takes many repetitions to get into a rhythm that I'm happy with.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sue, and one that I think every speaker can relate to. I have a clue that will help you get into the rhythm faster. Be the speech. This is in bold. Be the speech, and BE is in all caps. BE the speech. Here we go. You are reciting out loud what you're going to say, moving your jaw and mouth muscles to manifest the ideas you've put down. You are also going back in and analyzing the specific content and where some inserts would fit in. All of this leads to rapidly accelerating familiarity and comfort with the material, leading to an ability to be conversational rather than word for word. This step also prevents any pre-presentation anxiety from occurring. Ultimately, this kind of interaction between you and your outline content creates deeper familiarity with your subject matter and makes the speech a part of you rather than only what you wrote on paper. So by practicing for timing and editing your outline, you build the confidence you need to actually get away from the outline and closer to an ability to be completely conversational and interactive with your audience when delivering your presentation. There are, however, still 2 more steps to go. And while you have done most of the heavy lifting in preparing for your speech at this point, you need to sprint to the finish line by taking these last 2 tips just as seriously, which we'll cover in the following 2 weeks.
Then this is fabulous. So thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. So for a tip number 28 recap, the 6th step to fearless speech prep is to measure the time it takes to say out loud what you have drafted in your outline. Hear how you sound. Measure the time it takes. Go back in, make the necessary edits and adjustments until you feel you got it. And then it is time to move on to step number 7, which is to create your visuals. And we'll talk about that next week, how to avoid death by PowerPoint, to say it fun. All right, so there you go. That's tip number 28. We want to measure the timing, and there's pieces about what we went through just now that I can elaborate on a little bit, but there's nothing more important than your comments, questions, and dialogue around what we just read through.
I think for me, when going through this process of measuring time, it's good to think about what's the context of when you're actually going to be presenting a speech, whatever it is. Are you going to be standing up? Are you sitting down? And to almost go through that as well.
Rehearse, right? Yeah.
Yeah. To when you're measuring the time, to stand, like if you're going to be doing a speech, stand up, feel that movement, feel that your body engaging in it as well, because if there's an emphasis that you want to put on something, you want to be able to move with that. And so your timing is going to be impacted by, if you want to pause.
I love this.
All that sort of thing.
Yeah. What you're talking about is you're elaborating on this point that I made is be the speech. Don't just recite it with your self-talk in your head, because you can do that in, like a 1/10 of the time it takes to actually real time it takes to verbalize, right? So I love what you're talking about is you want to stand up and you want to move. You're talking about be the speech. Don't just recite it in your head out loud, and don't just read it out loud sitting at your computer. You're not going to deliver it that way. Now, next week, we talk about creating the visuals. We're going to elaborate on what you're talking about right now, which is you don't just create your visuals, but you go back and you stand up and you imagine, well, where will these visuals be in the room? And you practice. How will you introduce your visuals? How will you refer to your visuals? And how will you get rid of your visuals so the audience comes back to you? But you don't want to just create your visuals. You want to rehearse physically how you will actualize or enliven or make visible your visuals, and how will the visuals do what they're intended to do, and then how will you get rid of them so they're not a distraction. So further, we're going deeper then on this be the speech, but you're getting us started in going deeper with that comment there, Sue. I love that. Now, the only other thing I would say to that is, for starters, the first time we read it out loud, right? Remember, the outline is not the speech. It's just step 5 in preparing, right? So we have to always keep in mind that even though I'm reading these words out loud, word for word right now, it's not because I'm going to say these things out loud, word for word, when I'm not trying to memorize. I'm just trying to get a feel for the timing to see if I need to go in and take stuff out or if I need to go in and put stuff in. Okay. But that's what helps me burn a groove, right? So for the purposes of today's tip, okay, measuring the time, I'm okay if the first time you read out loud, you're just sitting there at your desk, as long as you read out loud, because we're talking about getting the timing down. And whether you're standing or sitting, verbally out loud will give you real time versus what it will be just reading it off the computer in your head. Okay. So but once you've done that and then you go back and you're like, oh my God, it's a couple minutes too long. Now you're reading for where can I take stuff out? So you're rereading the whole thing. But you're reading it for where can I cut and still keep a logical relationship? Will this still make sense? So now you're burning the groove in your mind of like studying what comes, right? What's going on in the speech. And then what can I take out and still keep cohesion in my speech? Or you're looking for, oh my God, that was fast. That was only 3 minutes. And they expect me to talk for 15. Now you go back, you're like, where can I add a story? Where can I add a testimonial? Where can I add a quote? Where can I add a case study? Where can I add a joke? Or where can I add a little, hey, does anybody have any questions about this? I can take one question if anybody has one real quick. Okay, no questions. All right, let me continue. So you can strategically decide, but in the process of looking for where in that speech am I going to add something, you're burning the groove. Right? You're running this, and now you add it or you take out. And then the joke I always tell, are you ready for this, D? Are you ready for this, Sue? For years and years and years and years and years and years, I would say, like, the joke I would tell in the classrooms when I'm doing this with adult learners, right? Step away from the computer. We have the place surrounded. Slowly stand up and back away from the computer. Like, at some point, you got to get off the damn computer. Okay. And you got to get on your feet and start to move your body in a way where you're going to be a speaker. So, Sue, you see how excited I am about the insight that you shared and how much more I had to add to that. And thank you for laughing at my joke. We have the place surrounded. Back away from the computer. Slowly back away from the computer. We have the place surrounded. It's kind of funny. I always get a laugh. That joke doesn't get old. Thank you, guys. D, what do you got?
Oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts on this topic. So lots of things are running through my head. One of them is, I think, something you're going to talk about probably next week, which is like, people that are stuck behind the podium, because they're probably did not get up and practice and walk around and do that stuff. They get up there and they get a little intimidated and they stand behind the podium. So I was thinking about that. I was also thinking about, I've noticed for myself, and I don't know if this happens, the more you do it, but I get more ideas when I say things out loud than when I just write them down. So when I write an outline, I thank you. When I start saying it out loud, and I'm like, okay, I want to hear what this sounds like. And so whether I'm sitting on my couch saying it or I'm, whatever, I'm saying it out loud. I'm like, oh, I want to talk about this. Oh, I want to make sure I mention that. And so I'll add it to my little, my notes.
Your collection you make like a collection bucket of content pieces that you want. Yep.
Yeah, it sparked something different for me than writing does.
Okay, good.
Writing helps me a lot, and I think a lot of people are like that. But it also, when I hear it out loud, different ideas will start popping into my head, and it really helps me develop and sometimes reorganize too. Does that still happen to you?
What you mean that when I'm out loud, more ideas come than I had originally? Yeah, absolutely. And here's what we want to, that's why structure helps us so much. There's freedom within the framework, right? But one of the things that we also have to understand as speakers, authors, content producers, thought leaders, right? People of influence. Most of us always have new ideas about what we want to say and how we want to get it across. Like, in other words, I wouldn't think linear, like, when I'm speaking versus writing, I get more ideas. I'd like you to say, of course, right? And when you're laying in bed, you'll get more ideas. And when you're at the coffee shop telling somebody about the engagement that you got and they ask you a question, you're like, oh my God, that gives an idea. Like, we want to be ready for ideas to be coming all over the place. And we don't want to be worried about that. We don't want to limit. We don't want to get into a limiting belief about we only get ideas here or we only get ideas there. I want to be open to all the places I get ideas. What's more important as to whether I get them here, there, or everywhere is how do I collect them? How do I remember them once they come? And then what's the decision-making framework for whether or not they make it into this speech for this engagement for this audience or not, right? Is that helpful? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And let me just give a shout out real quick to Deanna in Chicago. She is the founder of Label Free Podcast. She had me on her podcast earlier in the year. She's one of the most dynamic podcast hosts, and I've been on a lot of them, like dozens, right? And she, like, right away, she just saw something, heard something, and asked me a question that no other podcast host has asked. And I wanted to talk about the integrity game, but she caught on to this like little cheeky, jovial, unretired professor. Unretired? What's that all about? And so she was picking up what I was putting down. Some people, they gloss right over it. And she's like, hang on a second. We can talk about this integrity game thing, but talk to me about this unretired professor. And then we went on a conversation about education and the challenge between applied versus academic and the business of education and the attention span of student, all this stuff that's really important to me that I had no intention of talking about, but she just, her insights and her, I don't know what her radar is, but she made an engagement. There's a little heart. And now I realize if I scroll my mouse over the heart, it tells me who's it from. And it's from one of my favorite podcast hosts of all time. And I'm talking dozens and dozens and dozens. It's going to be hard. You're going to have a hard time finding a better host than Deanna. And it's blowing up. She's taking it to TV and she's just on fire. She's like one of the hardest working women in show business, and her and Diane Forster and some others that I'm aware of. But I just want to give the love right back to you, Deanna. Thank you for chiming in, and thank you for blessing us with that little heart icon. And congratulations on all your success. You go to bed every night with a sore foot from kicking so much ass. All right, back to the matter at hand. We are talking. Thank you for letting me do that. Re-welcoming you all to Get a Clue in 52 for speakers with my co-author, Sue Mathieson, and Dee. You're here for 2 weeks in a row. I have a feeling that you might be a regular moving forward. You are a sustainability expert, project management and construction and engineering and all of that, but you've got a future as an author, speaker, coach, and I'm thrilled that you're in the ecosystem and getting value from what we're doing. And what we've done today is we've talked about tip number 28, measure the time. It's the 6th step to fearless public speaking, even though it's number 28 overall in our collection of 52 tips. That means we've got 2 more tips in this section, 2 more steps to being fearless, but we're not done, because then in section 4, we've got 10 tips that break down this whole outlining strategy into tactical executable tips that I'm looking forward to taking you through. So having reset where we're at overall this week, let me offer up the stage or the floor to Sue or Dee for any comments, questions. I'm looking, oh my God, where did the time go, Sue? 11:45. I don't feel energetically that I'm ready for last call, but chronologically, we're ready for last call. So comments, questions, jokes, riddles, limericks, expressions of gratitude, or haikus if you want to. Last call, but we'll do an extended last call in case there's a lot to say or ask. Anything at all. Questions, comments, expressions of gratitude, any of it.
I guess for me, one thing that comes to mind is, as we're reading these tips, and today specifically around measuring the time, is not to get caught up in that this is the only time that we measure the time. Once we do it the first time, make our adjustments, we need to keep iterating that through and keep going back and checking as we move further through the development of our speech. Is to keep checking the time.
Yeah, it's not, you don't do anything once. You never go, you don't go to the gym once and walk out with a 6-pack. I mean, right? And by the way, speaking for myself personally, why would anybody want a 6-pack when you can have a keg? You know what I'm saying? But that's besides the point. Thank you. The idea is, I wrote the integrity game keynote, right? I wrote the keynote for the integrity game. But what I want people to look forward to, you're right. I don't just measure the timing once, right? Because I've had to deliver the integrity game keynote in 15 minutes, in 30 minutes, 45, or I had an entire full day soft skill training for a group of adult learners in Educational School District in 105 in Washington, and it was a full day training on civility, right? So now I have to figure out not just the timing of the integrity game keynote, but I have an 8-hour training day or 6-hour training day, right, online, and how much of that is the content, soft skill content on civility. So now if I package civility as a matter of integrity game, right, a matter of integrity, and this is an integrity game workshop, an integrity game soft skills training for the branding purpose. Now the main attraction is the civility training. So now I got to reduce and get through the integrity game part in a briefer amount of time just to set the stage. So I like the accordion idea. It's like once you've got your keynote, your master speech, lock, stock, and barrel, right? And you could have a couple of different keynotes, right? And I do. The one that I'm always talking about these days is integrity game because of its dynamism, right? But the idea is, I need to know if I only have 15 minutes to deliver the integrity game, what am I including and what am I excluding? If I have 30 minutes, if I have 45 minutes, right? I went to the Bahamas earlier this year, in the wellness conference, right? And it's like, all right, I have 30 minutes, maybe 45 if it's going, right? So I knew I had to get all the content down, plus my interaction with the audience, and I actually planned for that. When I ask, hey, how many of you believe you have integrity? And everybody raises their hand. And I say, hang on, repeat after me. I solemnly swear not to shoot the messenger. And they laugh. Hang on. What is it? Right? What are we talking about? Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. Right? Now, if I've got 45 minutes, I'll spend 7 minutes. I know in my mental clock, I can play around with my audience a little bit. I can tell a couple of jokes.
Yeah.
Right? But if I only have 15 minutes, I'll say, hey, I ask audiences what integrity is, and I always get these two answers. So I'll just give the answers rather than taking the time to pull the answers out of my audience. That's one place I know I can accordion and shorten. So we start to, when the speech is burned into our brain, we already know where in our talk we can add stuff, take stuff out, where we can, the idea is accordion. But once you've got your vertebrae, your core content, what your brand is, what your promise to the marketplace is, what your subject matter expertise is, what's the purpose of the speech, what version of your core keynote, right, do you need to edit or modify in order to achieve that purpose for that? Right, we're building towards all of that, Sue. I hope that was valuable in response to your comment.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, very cool. Anything else for last call? I've got another thing coming up in 9 minutes, so
okay,
we're at last call.
I have one quick one.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier slowing down.
I sure did.
It's a challenge, right?
For me, yeah.
And I think it's a challenge for a lot of people, because especially if you're newer to speaking, or, maybe even not so newer to speaking, the tendency is to subconsciously, you kind of want to almost get through it, right? And so you have a tendency, you get a little bit nervous, maybe you want to rush.
Let's just say adrenalized. You're adrenalized.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's excitement, good, bad, or indifferent. There's excitement around the opportunity to get up in front of people and speak. And I guess I would like to hear, what strategies do you use to force yourself to slow down, like when you're practicing?
Off the top of my
timing.
Yeah, off the top of my head, right? Off the top of my head, I'll give you a couple of quick strategies, right? I can't give them all to you because we're pressed for time. But number one, audience interaction. Audience interaction will always slow me down because I got to listen to what the audience has to say. Does that make sense? So I'll say, are there any realtors in the room? And that'll slow me down long enough to see if anybody, right? Oh, okay, you practice real estate, and tell me more about that. And so I love to find somebody in the audience, learn about them real quickly, and then use whatever I just learned about them to continue with my talk. And then I got to slow down, because rather than going autopilot and RoboCop or whatever, right, I actually have to take the time to think about how my content attaches to the anecdote I just learned, or whatever I just learned anecdotally about this person. So let me give you an example. I'm teaching smart goal setting, and I want to talk about all of the why I changed the A. I added an A and changed the R in smart goal setting. So I'm talking about what each letter means: specific, measurable. Then we get to the first A, achievable. So I go deeper. How many of you, how do we know if a goal is achievable or not? There's two ways, right? One, can a human being do it? If a human being can do it, D can do it, right? But what's more important than that is, do I believe I can? So now let's say I want to slow down. Who's my realtor in the audience? And role play this with me, Sue. Sue, who's the realtor in the audience? Oh, Sue. Okay, great. Right? 12. How many deals did you do last year?
3.
Not 12. Anyway, whatever.
I was thinking a month, but no.
How many deals did you do? 12. How many? All right. What's your goal this year? 18.
18.
Okay, awesome. 50% increase. That's awesome. Here we go. Do you believe you can do 1,800 deals this year?
No.
Do you believe you can do 19?
No.
19, you could do 19.
The answer is yes.
19. I thought 19. You said 90.
I'm sorry, no. 90, no. I don't believe you. No, anyway, no, I believe in you. Right, watch.
19,
can you do one? Yeah. Your goal is 18. Could you do 1,800?
No.
Could you do 19?
19, yes.
Okay. Could you do 140?
No.
Do you think you could do 20?
Yep.
Do you think you could do 90? 90?
No.
Yeah, from 12 to 90.
Mm.
Do you think if you got lucky, you got some referrals, if a couple of things went your way with some really hard work, and do you think you could do 21?
Yeah.
50?
No.
22?
Yep.
45?
No.
23?
Yeah.
You
Might
starting
be
to
stretching it.
All right. I just inched. So, by the way, first of all, D, that slowed me down, right? I'm giving a talk on goal setting, and I slowed down to have this interaction. Now, everybody is on the edge of their seat going, where's this going? And now I can step back and say, hey, everybody, I just took Sue to the threshold of belief without taking her over. Whether we believe we can or believe we cannot, we are right. So never fall short. Right? Sometimes we need somebody outside of us to lead us all the way up to the threshold of belief. But as soon as we set a goal that we don't believe we can achieve, we're going to go prove ourselves right. But if our goal remains within the threshold of belief, then we'll go ahead and prove ourselves right about that too. So does that give you an example, D? So like I'll do audience interaction, which will slow me way down. And it give me the opportunity to make my points in way more deliberate, right ways. The other thing too is I'll just say, are you with me? Who's with me? I'll just ask for some feedback throughout the speech. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you reading what I'm spelling? Are you smelling what I'm cooking? Is this landing? Does anybody have any questions? So sometimes I do an intentional audience interaction thing that I want to take them through to a point. And sometimes they'll just say, hey, you guys, let me take, I'm on fire up here. Can I take a sip of water while you guys think of a question to ask me? Right. But I want to be myself at all times. Right. I want to be myself. And sometimes the other thing too is another idea that comes to mind is sometimes I'll preempt. Hey everyone, I'm so excited about what I'm going to talk to you about today that I might go super fast. So if at any time any of you believe I'm going too fast, just say briefcase and I'll slow down. Everybody say it with me.
Briefcase.
All right. So when I hear the word briefcase out loud, I will slow down. Otherwise, take notes. Otherwise, break out your phones and record me. Somebody live stream this and kick it out all over the world. The more, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, I'm available after. You don't have to worry about furious note taking. There's more where this came from. So I'll try to preempt some of those things, right? I know myself. I know that when I get going, I get going.
Go on, finish that.
Well, I got 2.5 minutes before my next call, but go ahead.
Yeah, quickly, I was just going to offer the flip side to that is one thing that I had to learn was actually to speed up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That came to mind when you originally, yeah, very good, Sue.
What happened for me is I had severe depression, and through my recovery, to get my brain, and I won't go into the detail, but my brain actually slowed down. So when I was speaking, my speech was very slow. And
I would say deliberate.
No, it was slow because okay. I had to think about what was coming next. It was incredible what happened. But anyway, interesting how the brain is just such an amazing machine. But I became conscious of how slow I was in speaking, and I was boring and I was losing people. I wasn't engaging, and I had to consciously go the other way to become way more animated, to pick up my speed. And so there is a flip side.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Now, as much as I'd like to keep going, I'll just say that we will keep going next week. So come on back. For Get a Clue in 52, tip number 29. Next week, we're feeling fine with tip number 29. But today, my thanks to Deanna, who chimed in with a heart icon, and Sue, as always. And Dee, it's great to see you 2 weeks in a row here on Get a Clue in 52 for speakers. I love you all, and we'll see everybody next week. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye. Have a great week.